So perhaps you might remember the last video I made, the unboxing from Amazon containing these titles. I said that I was going to come back with a follow-up in which I was intending to review everything that I talked about, everything that I unboxed. And that's what's going to happen today. It took me a lot longer than I anticipated because various reasons. Part of it was just me being a bit too eager when I said that it's gonna take me a couple of weeks to watch this, because I really was looking forward to everything. Actually, this is not part of it, but there's a reason why it's here. Yeah, I could have gone through this in 2 weeks. It's about a film a day. But then I realized later that, well, I don't really like to rush things. There were a few things here that I just needed to find the right mood for. So it took me a bit longer than expected. Then I've struggled a bit with sleeping problems and schedule, just not been in the mood to talk about them. And so time has passed, and I don't know how long it's been, but it's been quite a lot longer than I expected. So sorry about that. I'm not sure that anyone has necessarily been waiting for this video, but I like to keep what I promise. And so I almost felt like I had been pinning myself into a corner because I promised reviews for these. I don't know if I did that exactly, but I feel like I'm just gonna have to do my best with these. I may not be able to offer deep reviews on them, but that's not usually what I do anyway. But I'll talk about I just try to explore my thoughts regarding these films, and so now you know what to expect. I guess if you haven't seen the unboxing, there's little point in that now, because you already know what titles are included. But if you haven't seen the unboxing, well, it's the last one that I uploaded, and I don't know what order to start talking about these in. I guess I can start with the two indicator titles, which are right here. So Light Sleeper first of all. Whoops. Yeah, a Paul Schrader film. Willem Dafoe, Susan Sarandon. I was really excited when this was announced, partly because I've been wanting to see this film because it looked good. One of those films that were popular but maybe a little bit underseen. People talked about it in those terms. And besides, I'm a fan of the things that I've seen from Paul Schrader, so this was a nice opportunity to see another one. There's a really nice sort of sense of sort of sentimentality in the right way. It's a really romantic, kind of very vibrant, almost noir-like film. It's a really emotionally moving film. It's been a while since I saw some of these. I hope I can remember the plots. As I recall it, Willem Dafoe, he played a guy who was sort of he was dealing drugs, and his employer, played by Susan Sarandon, she was getting out of that business essentially, which makes him kind of have to look for something else as well. And it's a really good one. There's a few nice extras here as well. The booklet wasn't my absolute favorite. I don't always read the booklets, but I've started to do that more often. I feel like the more sparse I've had to be with my pickups, the more time I can dedicate to them. So reading the booklets has been a nice sort of a silver lining in that whole thing. I may not be able to buy as much as I was able to a few years ago, but I can spend more time with the things that I do buy. So there's less of a stress factor there, which is just silly to begin with. But anyway, Invincible is the other one, from Werner Herzog. I was a little bit surprised when they announced this, because I thought that it just seemed like an unusual pick for them. But I'm really glad that that they released it. I think by now, by the way, there's always people walking by here. I'm living on the ground floor, and I have the, sitting right by the window, so people are always looking at me when they walk by. Why is he talking to himself like that? Anyway, somebody walked by just now, which is why I mentioned that. So what was I saying? I'm a fan of Werner Herzog from a number of years ago. The more I see from him, the more I like him and respect him. He always seemed to be. I wrote this essay about him once for like a school adjacent thing, whatever. And I mentioned that why I liked him so much was because he doesn't compromise. He always made the films he wanted to make in the way he made them, in the way he wanted to make them. So they always had this aura of eccentricity to some extent. Um, and this one is no different. There's a couple of interesting little symbolic scenes that you kind of have to make of them what you will, that I really like. He throws them in there, and it's clear that they're somehow connected to the story being told, but it's up to you to decide how. I remember that scene in, this is not a spoiler actually, but it's the last scene of Strozek, and it involves a chicken, I think, or a rooster perhaps, but anyway. And Werner, it's sort of, yeah, you know, whatever. It's a picture of a chicken or a shot of a chicken, and Werner Herzog said in the commentary that I don't know why it's there, what it means, but I know that it's a great metaphor for something, which might seem like a cop out in some cases, but in his, I mean, I really feel like those images reach out in a certain way. If you put words on them, they're not going to be as meaningful. And there's a couple of those things in here that it's not quite as powerful as some of his other ones, but I did like it. It involves the sport of strongman. In fact, it's based on. Speaking of the booklets, this is a really interesting booklet. It goes into some of the history behind the real people. I think it's here at the end somewhere. Yeah, Sigmund Breitbart. I don't know. I seem to recall him living at a slightly different time. That yeah, so he lived in the 20s. It seems. Yeah, early 20s, and this film takes place during the Second World War. And so Herzog sort of adjusts his perspective a little bit, or he borrows the real life person, but then he places him in a different time period, which I don't mind, unless you're making a film and you're pretending that it's the truth of what happened. But Werner Herzog never did that. He always adjusted facts, but he was always very clear about the fact that this is film. The nature of film is manipulation. If I wanted to tell the truth, I would just be reading the phone book. Anyway, but as a fan of strongman, this was interesting to me because it stars Yuko Ahola, who won World's Strongest Man twice. I think he's about 50 today, and he won in his 20s, in the 90s, late 90s, I think. And so he's a really impressive athlete. There's a couple of scenes in here where he's lifting real weights, and you can tell that he's doing it for real. So he's doing this deadlift, which is essentially consisting of lifting a barbell with a shitload of weights off the floor to a standing position. And I was really looking forward to that, because I was like, okay, let's see how this looks, because I know that I'd be able to tell if the weights were fake, which they definitely were not. And so I thought to myself, he must have picked those weights. Like, he must have suggested a weight that was comfortable for him, but which was going to look really, really challenging. And they did. I don't know how much the weight might have been, 360, 370, 380 kilos. I don't know, maybe not that much, something like that. And they only had one take. And Herzog talks in the commentary about that. And there's the scene ends with somebody throwing something at him, so he loses his balance. So they only had one take to do that. So Herzog himself, he was like, I don't trust anybody else to do this. I'm gonna grab this glass, whatever, and throw it at him myself. And speaking of him in the commentaries, he always knows what he's talking about. The film he makes, he always remember the details about them, which I always thought was impressive. But of course, it's hard to know if somebody's making stuff up, or if they're pretending to be confident about their memory, and maybe they are twisting some facts. But no, most things he said about the strongman sport, or the weights lifted, or the conditions involved, and so on, definitely seemed more or less true. So that was kind of cool to hear, to actually find, to kind of to get an answer to that, if you will. He doesn't just make shit up. He does remember a lot about the films he made. Anyway, that was an unnecessary tangent, but this Blu-ray is exceptional. The film is good. It's moving. It's a little bit cheesy and not the most effective film in the world. Yuko Ahola is not an actor, obviously. Well, he is technically. He was in Kingdom of Heaven and Bad Day to Go Fishing, whatever it's called. But I mean, he's a strong man at its core. But he's good in this. Tim Roth is pretty good as this kind of, not magician, but this kind of illusionist or manipulator guy. Yeah, I mean, the film wasn't as effective to me. I think is this part of the artwork or is this some crap? I think this is like dust anyway. It wasn't as effective to me as some of the other ones that I've seen from him, but I really liked it. I can talk about the other two from an adjacent label here next. Anti-Worlds, so Dogs Don't Wear Pants, a Finnish film from 2019. I haven't seen too many Finnish films, or I have seen a few, but it's been a while. But this one, it follows this grieving father, grief-stricken man whose wife died, and he has to bring up his daughter himself, and many years later he's still sort of affected by this trauma, and he seeks solace in an S&M club, and there's this sort of possibly romantic relationship developing between him and the dominatrix, and it's actually quite moving. There's a few scenes that really are quite moving. Overall, the story wasn't as effective, but the ending is really, really sweet, actually. Anyway, I wasn't blown away by it, but I really love that ending. I don't think I'll forget about the ending anytime soon. And the acting was good. It really was a good movie. I had no issues. I would have no issues recommending it or returning to it. This one, on the other hand, I was a bit disappointed by. The Whalebone Box, Andrew Cutting. So this is where my faith in labels sometimes lets me down. It's absolutely no issue. It's completely part of the journey to kind of see films that you're not a fan of. And there's a part of me who really likes seeing films that I don't like, because that's part of the process too. It's, seeing a film that you can appreciate for what it is, but it's not gonna connect with you. Giving it a quote unquote low rating on quote unquote Letterboxd, it doesn't mean that you hated it or that you were offended by it. It really didn't connect with me. It's just it mixes all these different ideas and sources of film, or it's filmed on Super 8 and on HD footage, and on cell phones, and I don't know, various sources of film and of recording techniques, and it didn't have a unified aesthetic, which I was missing, and the story was so vague and abstract that I was having a really hard time connecting to whatever was being told. I didn't really get anything out of it. It almost felt a bit too abstract for its own good, but a lot of people have liked it. Mark Kermode, he wrote a very favorable review about it, who apparently has been very favorable regarding Andrew Cutting's films over the years, and I didn't realize how proficient he has been, or how active he's been. He's made quite a few films that I am interested in seeing. Even though I didn't like this, I'm really eager to see some of the other ones, because I may like them better. And even if I don't, the releases look really good. There's a couple of releases of his films that came out before this one, and released by the BFI, that I would like to get. a lot of them focuses on his daughter, who today might be, I don't know for sure, I think she might be in her 30s or maybe 40s by now. But in the film, she's seems to be maybe a teenager, late teens, maybe early 20s. It's hard to tell. She has some kind of genetic condition which makes it difficult for her to walk and talk. But she is, actually an artist in her own right, and she is working with her father quite extensively. It appears, not just in front of the camera, but behind the camera as well, as I understand it. And there's footage from her in here, which I guess was filmed many years before the film was released in 2019. Although I'm not completely sure about that. But I like the idea of him often making films about the love of his daughter, the love he has for his daughter. That's a theme that's going to be emotionally resonant, and I think some of the other ones definitely touches on that or centers on that, because Eden, as her name is, she is in a few of the other ones as well. So I'm interested in seeing some of the other ones for sure. Actually, speaking of his daughter, my favorite thing on this, because there's a few extras here, a few short films. Which was the one? In Faraway Land was the one that uses a lot of Eden's, only uses Eden's sort of sketchings or cutout animations, and that was quite moving. So that was I wasn't a particularly great fan of it, but I thought that was the most moving thing in the set. Yeah, everything else I didn't like, unfortunately. And there's some very weird essays in the booklet that it attempts to maybe it's inspired by the nature of the film. It's very abstract once again, but there's some more concrete Q&A stuff towards the end of the booklet, which I liked reading more. So you do have that, but there's no other extras. So in terms of one of Anti-World's releases, I wouldn't say that one was one of my favorites that I've seen. I do have them all, and I have seen them all. There's a couple of extras on a couple of the releases that I haven't seen, but basically I've seen everything from all of their releases, and I forget if they announced a couple more recently. Yeah, I actually forget. I think this is wave 3, these two, and I think wave 4 is on the way, but I forget. Anyway, I have 2 movie releases that I'd like to show. First Cow, Kelly Reichardt. Apologies, my nose is a bit congested. This was really moving. I loved Certain Women, which I saw quite recently. This one was not quite on the same emotionally affecting level, but still a very good film. She always focused on the small scale drama and action, and this is no different. The first Cow refers to, it's the Pacific Northwest, I think, yeah, in Oregon, and 1820s. Apparently the situation where they live is such that cows and cow milk is very, very scarce, but you have this landowner played by Toby Jones who has a cow transported to the land, and this guy here, I forget his Cookie, I do remember, Cookie was his nickname in the film because he was a chef, and so he, together with this guy, they come together and they decide to come up with a scheme to steal some of that milk and make these cakes that they can then sell. And that's the whole focus of the story. So it's the arrival of a cow that sets off the entirety of the story. I love that. That's the action, And then of course you have other scenes that are more tense and dramatic throughout, but it's nothing over the top, and she does seem to stay true to her intentions of telling the small stories. I was a little bit worried that it was going to be more of I don't know. I don't know, but I'm more. I don't even know the word. Anyway, I'm gonna move on. I do like that she's using a kind of like a square, like a, she cuts off part of the screen like that. And I feel like there's a bit of a contradictory. I have a bit of a contradictory interpretation of that sort of square or 4 by 3 whatever screen, because partly it can actually extend instead of showing like a super wide screen, like the epics did at one point, and like Quentin Tarantino has been fond of, and so on. If you have a really small screen, that part of it can it can almost create the sense of a greater world, because you're more aware of the outside of the frame, and you realize to a greater extent that there are things that are not being shown, and the things that are not being seen are often the ones that are the most effective. Or not always, but a lot of the time. That's my impression anyway. And I don't know if that's contradictory in itself. I think that makes sense. But the contradictory part is that that kind of frame also invites a greater intimacy, I guess, with the characters and with the small action. So if you really zoom in or zone in on what's being told, you can really focus on these details. But I think both can be true at the same time. There's a few little things that they show. There's this neighbor played by Rene. Is his name here on the back? I don't think so, because he's only in like a very short scene. I forget his name, but he died quite recently. He actually voiced a couple of characters for the Uncharted games, or one character at least. I forget, but I forget his name. But there's just this one scene where they're walking by his little cabin or his hut, and he's just sweeping. And I just really wanted to follow in and see how he lived and get to know this character. But that's all you get. He's just kind of sweeping. The camera is walking by, and I found myself really fascinated with that very brief scenario of this neighbor who was a bit grumpy, and he was just trying to get on with his day. And anyway, so just showing very minimal snippets of various things can increase the scope of the thing. And I was really surprised that they filmed day for night, because it really looks good. And I think they filmed with a digital camera day for night, and I had no idea. Anyway, yeah, it's really good. I really liked it. This other one, also from movie Beginning, Deya Kulimbegashvili. Apologize. I recognize the Georgian last name because it's a Georgian film, and she is a Georgian filmmaker. I think there's some damage here. God damn it! I think I've accidentally damaged it. How did that happen? Or is this? No, this is part of the cover. Yeah, don't mind me. I'm just noticing things on the cover which I mistake for damage. I think that's part of the cover. Anyway. Oh God. What was I saying? There's an arm wrestler with the name Levon Saginashvili or something like that. So that's a very common. Seems to be a common last name in Georgia, at least. these only two Georgians that I could say by name, they do have this last name at least. Anyway, so Georgia. I don't know if I've seen a film from Georgia before. I don't think so. But this one was really remarkable. Again, it uses a pretty square frame, and it's a very slow film. This scene here, where the main character is just lying down on the ground, goes on for some time, and its intention is to explore the way the light, to some of the intention anyway, the way the light moves across the leaves, and she's lying there for a long time. I often feel like time is the least appreciated factor of film. You want to cut the film as effectively as possible to tell the story as effectively as possible. But if you forget about that and you just let time play itself out, you often get much more interesting scenes. And there's a lot of scenes here that go on for a while, but especially this one where this moment of serenity in an otherwise rather tumultuous and traumatic story of these opposing forces. She plays a Jehovah's Witness in a community who's under attack from an extremist group. Really extraordinary opening scene, touching on that attack. And it's a mysterious film. I cannot talk about this very efficiently, or I can't offer my interpretation for the story. But it's incredibly interesting visually. The ending is the ending is honestly jaw-dropping. The ending is something that I haven't seen before. The ending is, well, some of it reminded me of that film Post Tenebrous Looks by Carlos Reigadas. It had a bit of a similar kind of metaphysical or surreal nature, but most of the film isn't that. I don't know what else to say about it, but it moved me deeply, and I love the aesthetics of the film. It's absolutely extraordinary. I love the film, and there's an interview with her and Luca Guadagnino, which I would also recommend listening to, or a discussion between them. Let's move on to this one, Still Life, Ja Chang-ke. This is a great DVD that I would recommend anyone to get. It has the film, and then it has a commentary by Tony Raines. It has an accompanying documentary, which seemed to have been filmed alongside Still Life. And it features some of the scenes from Still Life, which I thought was a bit confusing. But very interesting documentary, not as good as the main film, but a very interesting kind of documentary, unusual film. And then a booklet, which is really informative. Part of the booklet is going into the physical releases, the history in China of illegal DVDs and so on, or the video market in China. Somewhere here at the end, new cinema in China, it says. So I thought this was going to be more about the various cinematic movements, and I suppose it touches on that a bit, but it's mostly about the market for cinema and the interest for cinema in the Chinese people. But the film Still Life takes place in this Three Gorges Dam. I was unsure if the Three Gorges region, if the Three Gorges was referring to the dam project that's being explored in the film, or if the Three Gorges was the geographical component or the geographical place. It says region, so I think it might be the name of the place. But there's this dam that's being built, where water is being redirected, which in this place you can see a river here going by, and then there's mountains, and there's mountains all around, and the river kind of goes by for a long time, or a long distance. But the intention is for the water level to be increased quite significantly, which is going to bury or drown a lot of the buildings and the communities here. But the government has decided on this, and this was happening in real life, and so Ja Chang-ke, he filmed this film, which almost feels like a documentary at times, which I guess makes perfect sense. And then there's also these very weird scenes of science fiction or surrealist influences, or surrealist elements, I guess. So it's about this destruction of homes, this destruction in order for progress, I guess, for whatever is being considered with the dam. And that's a bit of a tragic story. And so it's this, I don't remember when this was filmed and when the dam was supposed to have been finished, but the film is from 2006. So I guess by now it must be finished, but I don't really know for sure. So, I mean, it's been too long since I saw some of these, so I feel like I should have done this video sooner because I've forgotten some of the details. But this is a really moving film and an excellent release. It's filmed on video or on digital, and so the picture quality is not quite as appealing to me as I was expecting. I was thinking that this was going to be a really achingly beautifully shot film, and I didn't have that feeling with it as much as I was expecting to. But it is a very beautifully a really beautiful film, and yeah, it follows these two different characters who are not related, who go back to the Three Gorges region to find. I mean, he's looking for his daughter, and then there's this woman who's looking for his for her husband. So their stories are somewhat contrasted, but I don't think they overlap too much. Yeah, I know for a fact that I wanted to say a few things about it that I forget. I was sitting here for a minute off camera trying to think like what was I what else did I want to say, but I forget, so I'm gonna have to move on. Okay, so this one next, Beatrice. I don't know how to say this, Sensi or Cenci, or I don't know. It's an Italian film by Lucio Fulci. It's more of a drama, but it's also clear that I mean this was in the late 60s, 1969, I think. So maybe a little bit before he got into the horror stuff. I mean, the zombie stuff was well into the 70s, but there's still some moments or some influences of exploitation and very grim violence and so on. But it's a really complex story. A lot of the plot that sets it up, I thought was really hard to get into. But once the plot is set up and the basis is set up, and then the simpler plot that is then happening above that, if you will, that was really enjoyable. And there's so much happening in this film. I think it's based on a real event. So in 1599, and it's a tale of murder and romance and abuse and violence and yeah, sentimentality to some extent. I don't know if I have anything else to say about it, but I really liked it. And then this one I saw the most recently, Raw Force. This was really fun. I was expecting this to be more bombastic and more kind of genre bending than it was. It is definitely that, but I was expecting the gore to be higher, and the comedy and the cheesy kind of almost farcical sequences to be less. But I wasn't disappointed because it's so charming. And it's not necessarily unintentionally funny. Some of it is, but a lot of it is tongue-in-cheek, and that might be off-putting sometimes. You kind of want these old B-movies to be gravely serious, and for the comedy to be unintentional. But in this case, there's definitely both, and it really works well. And the plot doesn't really make much sense. You have this island where there are monks who want to feast on humans, and so there's these people, these criminals who they kidnap women, and they ship them over to the island in exchange for colored styrofoam. But it was supposed to be jade in the film, so they have this trade-off, and then the gangsters find out about a tourist. They find out about this island being a tourist destination also, and so it's their job now to stop the boat with tourists going over to the island. So you have to ask yourselves, all this sinister activity is happening on this island, um, how is it that it's also the destination in a tourist book? It's a very odd combination, but it's a wonderful combination for the film. And is it filmed in the Philippines or I should remember that. Anyway, it's no. Anyway, I'm moving on. It's from the early '80s, I think, and there is a new interview. Actually, I think the extras, the behind the scenes documentary, is from a previously existing release in the US, maybe from Vinegar Syndrome or something. But there's a commentary that's new for this release. So I guess 101 Films wanted to one up the previous one. But the making of is quite entertaining with the director Ed Murphy. So if you like cheap kind of genre movies, then I would really recommend it. It's a lot more entertaining than maybe it has any right to be. Well, I don't know if that's entirely true, but it's really fun. Anyway, here then, a film by Mau Mau. This is a very sparsely told drama about sort of the alienation and the inactivity of a lot of the youth in China. It's about 10 years old, I think, yeah. And it's quite a delicately told story about various characters, a bit of a sprawling story in the sense that it shifts focus a few times between characters, and you have to piece certain things together. And I did rewatch some of it to piece it together even further. Although there is some very subtle sound design that I think is intended to be part of the puzzle. And I was watching this late at night without headphones, and so I had to keep the audio down. So I feel like I was missing out on some of the intricacies of the soundtrack. But some of the drama is so compelling and just achingly melancholy, and but somehow it's uplifting. That there's a couple of different women in the story whose fates sort of meet in a sense, and it ends on that note in a very moving way. This scene here on the cover is so it's one of those scenes where you're watching a film and you're watching a scene and the scene goes on and then something happens to the scene. It's almost like there's a shock, and all of a sudden you're seeing something different and something else is happening, and your eyes wide open. I don't know what it's one of the best scenes in a film that I have seen in a long time. The scene that is depicted on the cover, which I realize it's very hard to tell what's happening. There's not a lot of things happening. It's a lot of the well, I won't say anything else really. I don't want to spoil anything about it, but it's a really, really jarring and almost slightly traumatizing scene, even though nothing is really happening. But yeah, there's an interview on the disc with the director of the film Behemoth, Chow Lang, maybe, I forget his name. I just bought a DVD box set with his films. I haven't opened it yet. I haven't unboxed it. I'm waiting for that for a future video. So I do have it, but I forget what his name was, weirdly. But he was interviewing Mau Mau on the extra. So you have one great filmmaker interviewing another great filmmaker on the bonus interview here, and so that's the only extra here. And then there's a bit of a slightly unsatisfying booklet, but the film really speaks for itself. And yeah, I was really happy to pick up another second run release. They really are one of my absolute favorites along with Indicator. I think I would say that those two are my two favorites. Here's another film by Claire Denis that I wanted to see. 35 Shots of Rum, a film where mundane activities and sort of the aching beauty but tragedy of mundane life is brought to the forefront, and it is quite gripping. I do want to see it again. It's quite subtle. It's not subtle in the sense that you're missing things, but there's this feeling to it that you just have to get into the groove of it and connect to it. And for whatever reason, I was struggling just slightly with it, but it is very moving. And Claire Denis is a very talented filmmaker, and I really did like it. There's focus on I forget what it was. It's this kitchen tool. It's not it's I don't know what to call it. It's some kind of pasta maker or some kind of. It's not even that. It's a rice boiler or something. I forget what it is. But a kitchen I don't know the word. Appliance. I don't think that's the word I'm looking for. Whatever. A kitchen tool that is given a lot of attention. And I don't know exactly why it's given attention, but it's there for a reason. It means something. Maybe it simply means that this is a film about the small, mundane details of life, and those are often the ones that are easiest to connect with. But yeah, anyway, I think I'm underestimating the complexity of the story a little bit, but I would recommend it, and I'm gonna hold on to it dearly and rewatch it in the future. And I want to watch more from Claire Denis. Then this one, these are from New Wave films, by the way. I don't know how many I have from them, but I do have a few. Denis Cote, apologies. I realized that he was the director of, speaking of Second Run before, of this other film released by Second Run quite recently. I think it's called Curling. So I want to see that, because these two were interesting. Joy of Man's Desiring and Bestiaire. Bestiaire or Bestiary especially was really interesting. They're so minimal though. They're sort of like, they're not dramas. They're barely documentaries. They're sort of essay-like films, observational films about a lot of stillness, of people being observed in the workplace, sort of blue-collar jobs in Joy of Man's Desiring, and then animals and their captivity in Bestiary. There's some really, really stunning shots in Bestiary. This of the giraffe here, for example, is really extraordinary. And then Bestiary ends with a shot that I don't know if it means anything, but it's so. I don't think it's a spoiler either. It's a shot. There's a car going by. It's like at a zoo, and the car is going by, just looking at the animals, and then there's this bull or this cow or this, I forget what animal, that sort of just turns around and walks towards the car, sort of, and then the film ends. And does that scene mean anything? Maybe it doesn't, but I feel like it did, and I love those little thought experiments. Anyway, these are particularly difficult to talk about because they're so minimal. But Bestiary in particular I really liked. I'm trying to think if I can say anything else. I think I'm gonna have to settle for the limited things I said. The last thing I wasn't sure that I was gonna watch. It's the Shohei Imamura set from Arrow, the Survivor Ballads. So these are slightly later films from him. They're from the 80s. When exactly are they from? I mean, I think he was born in 1926. So he was still, only in his 60s, in the 80s. But he started much earlier. I can't even find the years. But anyway, it's in the... it's in the 80s sometime. And so these are slightly later than another... than most of the films from the other box set that I have containing his films. The box set from Eureka that was put out a while ago. from which this Blu-ray has been. I've taken this Blu-ray out from that set because, well, first of all, that other set, I was thinking whether maybe I want to go through that first before this, because I've had that for so long, and he did make those films before these. Maybe it's a good idea to go back to that set. I've only seen a couple of them. I've only seen this one and Profound Desires of the Gods. So there's like 6 other films that I haven't seen from that set. But ultimately I decided to watch these anyway, and I guess I'll pick the box set off the shelf at some point and finish it finally. But anyway, so I wasn't sure if I was going to watch these now, but I ended up doing that. And the reason why I brought this out was because I wanted to compare the releases a little bit, because this Ballad of Narayama is included in both sets, but this new Arrow release has a new interview with Tony Raines, as does the other two as well. I think he talks for about 2, maybe 3 hours in total. So yeah, so even if I already have the film, I still wanted to get this release, but also these two, of course. Mainly these two, but even this was interesting. I'm rambling. But I did rewatch Ballad of Narayama, and I have seen it before, but it's been about 4 or 5 years, and I remember liking it, and I still do, but it's not one of my favorites. But I do really find it to be very moving and beautifully shot. The ending in particular, the third act, is very compelling. The other two here, Sagan and Black Rain. Black Rain is very sentimental. It refers to the tar-like downfall post Hiroshima, 1945, and the atom bomb, and whether the people who have been touched by this black rain, whether they are going to be infected, whether they have been subjected to this radioactivity. And so that's the reference of the title, and it follows this young woman as she experiences this horror, and then she goes from there to live with her uncle. I think, was it her uncle? Anyway, and she goes off to another village, and the years pass, but the scars from the bombings obviously remain. I think even to this day, people are born with deformities and so on. I saw a documentary many years ago, which I forget what it was called. It's behind me somewhere. Maybe I can find it. I'm struggling to find it, but I do have it. It should be somewhere here. Anyway, it's called, I don't know, white light, black light, white light, black rain, maybe. I don't know. But it's a documentary about that, about the radioactivity living on in people and being brought forward into future generations, or causing issues with the genes and so on. And so the film touches on that absolutely, and it's in black and white. Most of Imamura's films, they were in color, and so it's a bit of a departure in a few different ways. But I mean, it's really it's Tony Raines talks about whether the effect of the film has to do with the subject and not so much the filmmaking, which I guess is fair. It isn't the most effective. It's not as, I mean, Profound Desires of the Gods is still one of my favorite films that I've seen, and it's not like it's on that level for me, but it is very moving, and it's an important story, and I guess part of Imamura's style was often to be critical or satirical about various things, but in this one he sort of leans into another sensibility, where he is embracing the tragedy of this historical event. Sagan is also sort of based on a historical event about this very faithful Japanese man who is faithful to the emperor, and he promises, he vows that when the emperor dies, he's going to commit I don't know if seppuku or harakiri. Maybe seppuku is the more appropriate word. I don't know exactly the difference, but yeah, it's a pretty sprawling story over many decades. Follows this main character as he seems to compromise his morals, and he starts to he forms this sort of brothel like business, and yeah, it's not the best one either. But I mean, these are all good. These are all very good films. But they all have they all have something that prevents me from really connecting to them for whatever reason. But I had such high expectations here, so it's a case of that. Like if I hadn't, yeah, if I didn't expect to like these, then I would be much more maybe talking more favorably about them. But I was expecting them to be really great, and they are good. Maybe just slightly underwhelming. Um, but Sagan ends with this really, really great sort of darkly satirical sequence that might be my favorite part of the film. But looking back on the film, there's quite a few different scenes that are pretty hard hitting and important. It is a black comedy, really, but it's also a period piece. It's not again, artistically and aesthetically, it's not the most interesting film, but the story does end up being quite compelling. And I guess I just wanted to mention that I also had this from Eureka before. The release, I mean, it's worth keeping both, because I mean, I would be keeping both anyway, because they have different titles on the box sets. But even for the release itself, Tony Raines did a previous interview for this one, and then a new one for this. And I think there might be. Is there a commentary here, or no? I don't think there is. But there's another booklet here too. Maybe that's not here. Maybe that's in the box set. Anyway, I'm done. I'm done with the video. I hope you enjoyed watching. Sorry for going on a bit and struggling to find the right words and so on. But that's it for now. I do have a couple of videos that are planned. I have a really big unboxing that I wanted to make around Christmas time. And so that's gonna come up. I'm gonna film that on maybe Boxing Day or something. And I hope that I can get it up very soon after that. And so, yeah, that's going to come very soon. It's going to be the biggest unboxing that I've done in many years. And so, if you like that kind of thing, well, anyway, that's coming up. Yeah, anyway, thank you for watching. And stay tuned for more great videos.